Welcome to What's New in 22Q. This deep dive is brought to you by 22Q11 Europe, the European association that supports families living with 22Q11.2 deletion syndrome. Today, we're diving deep into a topic that, well, it resonates with so many families navigating life with 22Q. Hearing. It's such a fundamental sense, isn't it? Absolutely crucial for development, communication, just overall quality of life. So for you listening, understanding the latest research on hearing loss in 22Q isn't just about, facts and figures. It's really about empowerment, knowing how to best support your child. Okay, so let's unpack this a bit. Hearing loss.
Yeah.
Something we often hear mentioned in the context of 22Q 11.2 deletion syndrome. But what does the most recent comprehensive research actually tell us?
That's a really essential question, and thankfully we do have some robust new insights to share today. The deep dive we're taking is based on a truly significant paper. It was led by Dr. Jill Arganbright and her dedicated team of researchers. The study is titled Hearing Loss in Children with 22q 11.2 Deletion Syndrome, and it was published quite recently in 2025 in the Laryngoscope.
Okay, the laryngoscope.
Yeah, and this wasn't just a small study. The team did a retrospective chart review, pulling a huge amount of data from two major 22Q centers. They reviewed 1,769 charts.
Wow.
And 775 of those met their specific study criteria. And critically, they analyzed over 2,500 individual audiograms.
2,500.
Those are the formal hearing test results. So it provided an incredibly rich data set. The sheer scale really underscores the weight of their findings,
Definitely. Over 2,500 audiograms.
Mm.
That's impressive. It certainly suggests a high level of confidence in the results.
So when we boil all that data down into sort of plain English for families, what's the main headline message?
Well, the headline is pretty clear, and it really backs up what many families and clinicians have observed over the years. Hearing loss is indeed remarkably common in children with 22q11.2 deletion syndrome. This study found that a significant majority, a full 73% of the children in their group, experienced some form of hearing loss at some point during their childhood. 73%, that's a huge number. So for families, this isn't just another statistic, is it? The real insight here is that hearing loss isn't just a potential symptom in children with 22q. This study seems to overwhelmingly confirm it's an expected characteristic for a large percentage. That must fundamentally shift how we as a community should think about screening and intervention right from day one.
Exactly. It absolutely does. It moves it from being, a possibility to a high probability. And when we dive a bit deeper into the types of hearing loss they saw, the vast majority was what's known as conductive hearing loss.
Okay.
And it was typically mild in severity. So for everyone listening, conductive hearing loss basically means there's a problem with how sound waves travel through the outer or middle ear to get to the inner ear.
Right, like a blockage.
Exactly. It's like the sound is physically blocked or muffled before it even gets to where it needs to go. In children with 22q, this often comes down to things like eustachian tube dysfunction, ETD, and chronic otitis media with effusion, which we often just call COMI.
Which is that persistent fluid.
That's right. Persistent fluid buildup in the middle ear. These issues directly dampen the sound vibrations.
That makes perfect sense. So it's often about a physical barrier or maybe issues with the plumbing, so to speak, of the ear. But conductive loss isn't the only type, is it? What did this study find out about sensorineural hearing loss that's different, involving the inner ear or the nerve pathways?
You're right, it's a different mechanism. And while conductive loss was definitely the most common, the study also carefully looked at sensorineural hearing loss. That involves issues with the inner ear itself, the cochlea, or the auditory nerve pathways to the brain. They found it was less common in this group compared to the conductive type, but it was certainly present. But here's some potentially good news for families on that front.
Okay.
For the children in the study who did have sensorineural hearing loss, it was largely stable. It wasn't progressive over time.
So it didn't tend to get worse as they got older?
Generally, no. According to their data, it tended to stay at the level it was first identified at, which is, a key piece of information for long-term management.
That stability is definitely reassuring. But this raises a really important question. When are these hearing issues typically getting picked up? What did this study find about the age of diagnosis?
It's a critical point. The study found the median age for a child's first audiogram, that full formal hearing test, was 4.4 years old.
4.4 years. That sounds, well, maybe a bit late. Especially when you think how crucial those early years are for speech and language development in any child, let alone a child of 22q who might already be facing some developmental hurdles. What are the risks of missing or delaying that early detection?
Exactly. Missing those critical early windows can mean significant developmental challenges that just become harder to overcome later on. Ideally, yes, we want to catch these issues much, much earlier than 4 years old.
Mm.
And another key thing for families to understand is that hearing in children with 22q can often fluctuate. It's not always static.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the study noted that 27%, about a quarter of children who had multiple audiograms, showed fluctuating hearing levels, meaning their hearing went up and down over time.
So it's not always a fixed state.
Not always, which really speaks to the need for ongoing monitoring, doesn't it? Even if things seem to improve for a while?
That variability must be tricky for parents to keep track of. Now, you mentioned eustachian tube dysfunction and fluid buildup as common causes for the conductive loss. We often hear about cleft palate being a big risk factor for ear issues generally, and it's common in 22q. Did this study confirm that link, or were there any surprises there?
This is where the study offered a really fascinating discovery, something that challenges maybe some long-held assumptions. While cleft palate is a known risk factor for ear problems, and yes, it's common in 22q 11.2 deletion syndrome, this research found something quite unexpected.
What was that?
Hearing loss was just as common in children with 22q without a cleft palate as it was in those with one.
Really? That's remarkable. So the presence of a cleft palate wasn't the main driver for hearing loss in this specific group. What does that tell us then? It suggests the hearing loss in 22q is happening regardless of that specific anatomical feature.
Precisely. It strongly suggests that other systemic factors are at play here. The researchers propose it might be due to more generalized palatal muscle weakness,
Oh.
which is also common in 22q. And this muscle weakness can affect how the eustachian tube functions, making it harder for the middle ear to drain properly. So it's not just about a structural cleft necessarily, but perhaps a more widespread issue with muscle function impacting ear health.
That's a really crucial insight. It broadens the picture. And with all this fluid buildup and eustachian tube dysfunction, it naturally leads us to think about ear tubes, tympanostomy tubes. What did this study show about how often children with 22q needed them?
The numbers here are quite striking. They really highlight how persistent these ear issues can be. About 39% of the children in this large study had at least one set of ear tubes, tympanostomy tubes, put in.
Okay, nearly 40%.
Yes, to help with that fluid buildup and ventilation. But what's even more telling, more than half of those children, 55% of them, needed multiple sets of tubes.
Wow, multiple sets.
Yeah. And if you compare that to the general population, only about 7% of kids might need tubes by age 3. And maybe less than 20% of those would need a second set.
So it's much, much higher in 22q.
Significantly higher.
Yeah.
It really points to how persistent, how chronic these ear fluid issues can be for children with 22q, often needing repeated interventions. It really underlines that for many families, it's a journey, not just a one-time fix.
It definitely sounds like an ongoing management challenge. And the reason we're spending so much time on this, of course, is that profound connection between hearing and development.
Right.
Why does this study really underscore the importance of early identification and treatment, particularly in the context of 22q?
It's absolutely vital. The study powerfully reminds us that identifying and treating hearing loss early and promptly is incredibly important. We already know that speech and language delays are very common in 22q 11.2 deletion syndrome.
Right.
So, if a child is also dealing with untreated hearing loss, even if it's mild, it unfortunately adds another significant barrier, and often a preventable one, a barrier to their speech development, language acquisition, their learning abilities, and ultimately school performance and social engagement too.
It makes sense if you can't consistently hear the sounds of language clearly.
Exactly. Learning to produce those sounds accurately becomes exponentially harder. So addressing hearing loss is really about removing a major obstacle, allowing these children to reach their full potential.
That's a great way to put it. Removing any extra barriers is key. You also mentioned earlier that the study looked at inner and middle ear abnormalities using imaging. Were there any other, maybe anatomical or even genetic links that stood out?
Yes, they did look into that. Looking deeper into the data, inner and middle ear abnormalities were in fact commonly seen on imaging. Things like subtle differences in the structure of the vestibule, the semicircular canals, the cochlea, even the ossicles, those tiny bones in the middle ear. These were frequently noted. And quite strikingly, the study found a significant link between sensorineural hearing loss, that inner ear type, and cardiac defects in children with 22q.
Oh, got that connection again between the heart and the inner ear. Is there a suspected genetic reason for that specific link within 22q?
There very well might be. This finding really aligns with what we understand about the TBX1 gene.
Okay.
TBX1 is a key gene located right within that deleted region on chromosome 22. And we know TBX1 is critical for the proper development of both the heart, particularly the outflow tracts and structures within the inner ear.
So it connects the two.
It suggests a deeper, more fundamental connection, a systemic impact within the syndrome that affects multiple developmental pathways at the same time. It's a really powerful illustration of those pleiotropic effects of the 22q deletion, how one genetic change can ripple out and have widespread effects across different body systems.
That really helps connect the dots. It's fascinating. Okay, so bringing all this really vital information together, what does this mean for you, for our listeners, for families, for caregivers who are navigating the day-to-day realities of 22q11.2 deletion syndrome? What are the most practical, actionable takeaways from this important piece of research?
Okay, well, the first and perhaps the clearest takeaway really emphasizes proactive and consistent screening. Given how common hearing loss is and how early it can impact development, it's just so important to ensure early and consistent hearing screening for your child.
Don't wait for problems to show up.
Exactly. Don't wait until you notice concerns, if possible. The study strongly supports the existing guidelines that recommend an annual visit with an ENT ear, nose, and throat specialist, and formal hearing tests, those audiograms, every 1 to 2 years, starting from a young age and continuing right into adulthood.
That idea of regular monitoring, not just waiting for obvious concerns, seems paramount. And given that these children often need ongoing support, what about building relationships with those key specialists?
Yes, absolutely critical. Building a strong, proactive relationship with both your otolaryngology team, the ENT folks, and your audiology team is key. Early and consistent involvement from these specialists helps ensure timely diagnosis, timely treatment, which, as we've said, is so important for supporting your child's overall development and removing those potential barriers to learning and communication.
Right.
Think of them as really integral partners in your child's care team, not just specialists you see when there's an acute problem.
That continuity of care sounds really valuable. You also mentioned earlier that hearing can fluctuate. That seems like a critical point for families to grasp. How should that awareness guide their approach?
It's crucial to remember that hearing can fluctuate. So if your child has hearing loss, it's really helpful to just be aware that it might not always stay at the same level. Continued monitoring is absolutely crucial, even if things seem to improve sometimes.
Because it might dip again.
Exactly, because those fluids or other underlying issues can return, sometimes unexpectedly. So vigilance, even when things seem to be going well, is really part of the journey.
That makes sense. Keep checking in. And thinking about that connection you highlighted between sensorineural hearing loss and cardiac defects, what should families with that specific combination keep in mind?
That's a good point. If your child has a known cardiac defect in addition to the 22q11.2 deletion syndrome, it might be worth discussing with your healthcare provider whether more aggressive or perhaps earlier screening specifically for sensorineural hearing loss is appropriate. Given the study's specific findings on that link, just being informed and asking the right questions about targeted screening could be beneficial.
Good advice. Proactive discussions. Ultimately, all these interventions, all this monitoring, it aims to support a child's overall development, right? How does addressing hearing loss fit into that bigger picture of managing 22q?
Ultimately, ensuring a child can hear as well as possible, directly and powerfully, supports their speech and language development. Full stop. Addressing any hearing loss is honestly one of the most impactful ways we can help overcome some of the common speech and language challenges associated with 22q. It helps foster better communication, better learning, better social interaction. It's really about building that solid foundation for everything else.
Building that foundation, I like that. And finally, for families who might feel a bit overwhelmed by the prospect of chronic ear issues, what's maybe a realistic expectation to hold on to?
That's important too. I think it's helpful to be prepared that managing ear fluid, the potential need for ear tubes, it might be more of a chronic, ongoing journey for children with 22q compared to other kids. It's often more like a marathon, not a sprint, you know? And patience with the process and with your medical team is truly key. It's often about managing an ongoing condition, not necessarily finding a permanent fix overnight. Understanding that can help families set realistic expectations and maybe reduce some frustration along the way.
That's really helpful perspective. Marathon, not a sprint. This deep dive into the latest research and, of course, other valuable resources is brought to you by 22q11 Europe. That's the European Association supporting families living with 22q11.2 deletion syndrome. We're here to help you stay informed and connected. Thank you so much for listening to What's New in 22Q, produced by 22Q11 Europe. The journey with 22Q, we know it can be complex, but being armed with knowledge, like the insights from this study, and taking that proactive approach, well, it really gives you the power to make a significant difference in your child's development. Take care, stay well, and we'll talk to you soon.